Okay, 10A right at the bottom. Maybe we'll just stop. We'll start at the two dots. Actually, no, let's start where we ended off. Yeah, 3 lines from the bottom, fourth to last word. And I guess in the new metric system, it's somewhere at the very end. Yeah. So, Ella di Yom Kippurim nechapru adiragal. We want to know, why don't we let the offering that's brought, the one that's brought on the outer altar, let that offering atone for what the offering on the 3 holidays atones for. According to our opinion now, each one atones for something else. Rabbi Shimon says that Rosh Chodesh atones for one thing, the 3 holidays atone for something else, and the he-goat that's brought on the outer altar atones for a third thing. So let that offering atone for what the holiday offerings atone for. Amar Kra, no, achas. Kapar achas mechaper, the eno mechaper shtei kaparos. So that it says by Yom Kippur that its offering will only atone once. And it's only going to atone for one atonement and not for 2 atonements. So it's only going to atone for itself and not for someone else. But that word achas, where is it stated? It's not stated by the outer goat offering, rather it's stated by the inner goat offering. It's written by the inner offering and not by the outer offering. We're asking why the outer offering can't atone for what the goats on the holidays atone for, and we're telling you achas. Well, achas is only mentioned by the inner offering and not by the outer offering. Says the Gemara, you're right, but the ksiv, b'fnei the ksiv, Amar Kra, the answer is, turn the page, Milvad chatas hakipurim. So in that verse itself, in that verse which states, Seir izim echad chatas, milvad chatas hakipurim, you bring one seir chatas, one he-goat, aside from the other things you bring on Yom Kippur. What's that? That's the outer offering. So the inner offering and the outer offering are compared to each other. The iskish chitzon pnimi, and they're compared to one another, teaching you that just like the inner goat only atones for its atonement, the outer goat will only atone for its atonement also. Therefore, when it says achas, referring to the inner goat, since they're juxtaposed to each other, that rule will apply to the outer goat also, and therefore it will not atone for anything else other than what it's atoning for. Okay. Now, the next opinion of the Mishnah was Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda. So he said that the Rosh Chodesh offering atones for a pure person who ate something which is impure. Now, the way he understands it is that everyone sort of adds on to the next. So Rosh Chodesh atones for the pure person who ate something that was impure, and that's it. Then the 3 holidays atone for that, plus somebody that had no knowledge in the beginning, no knowledge at the end, and ate something in the middle, or walking to the Beis HaMikdash. And then Yom Kippur atones for both of those, and the third thing, which is the person that had no knowledge in the beginning, and yes, knowledge at the end. So each one goes up. So the Rosh Chodesh atones for 1, the 3 holidays atones for 2, and Yom Kippur atones for 3 things. That's his opinion. So now, on that, the Gemara says, why does Rosh Chodesh not atone for that which the 3 holidays atones for? Damar Kra, as it says, it bears 1 sin. So by Rosh Chodesh it says Avon, which is it only atones for 1 sin. So, and it doesn't atone for more than that. So Rosh Chodesh is limited to atoning for 1 thing. Fine. Dirigalim nami lo nechapru. So now we're asking, well, if you're going to say that, so why don't you take another word in the section of the Rosh Chodesh offering, and that should teach you that nothing else can atone for it. So Let the 3 holidays sacrifices, let them not atone for that which Rosh Chodesh atones for. Why would I say that? The Amar Kra, Osa. It sounds like in that pasuk it says only it's. It says the word Osa. Yeah, it says the Osa Nasan Lacham La says Avan. Only this sin can go and carry that avera. Only this sacrifice, can go and carry and bear that avera. Osa, only it can bear that avera. Osahu no say avon, the ain achar no say avon. But meaning once you're learning that parsha being so specific in the words, so say also only its korban can atone for its sin, but nobody else can atone for its sin. And yet, Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda said that a goat that's brought on the 3 holidays atones for itself, its avera, and the Rosh Chodesh avera. Why? So says the Gemara, Osa lo mashmale. No, that word Osa, Rabbi Shimon, he wasn't, not that it wasn't exact, but he didn't understand it had that implication. It had the implication of it atones for its sin. You're right, but not that nothing else could atone for it. It's just that it atones for it, and therefore, that's not going to be a question on him. Okay, Ma'ishna deregalim v'lo mechapri ad yom kippurim. Okay, so the 3 holidays don't atone for Rosh Chodesh, but they don't atone for Yom Kippur. So why not? Because the Amar Kra achas b'shana kapara zulo tehel achas b'shana. This atonement of Yom Kippur will only be once a year. So nothing else can atone for it. Well, Yom Kippurim nami lo nechaper the regalim. If that's true, so don't let the Yom Kippur offering also atone for the holiday offerings. Why not? It says achas, achas ksiv, kapara achas mechaper v'enam chaper shtei kaparos. It's achas. So let it only atone for one atonement and not for 2 atonements. Let it only atone for itself, not atone for something else. So says the Gemara, no, achas lo mashmale. That word achas doesn't mean it's only atoning one thing and not 2 things. It just means for this one thing it atones. It does atone, but not one as opposed to 2. Just also for this it atones, but not to exclude other things. So says the Gemara, hold on, amai dechiksiv achas. Where does it say achas? It only says it by the inner he goat, not by the goat that's brought on the outer altar, only by the inner altar. Therefore, you can't teach me that the chiksiv achas b'seir nasa b'fnim. It's only mentioned by the inner goat. Well, if that's true, so then dirigolim nami nechapra ad yom kippurim. Now that the word achas, it's only mentioned by the inner goat. So once again, why don't you let the regalim, the holiday offerings, atone for the Yom Kippur offering? Because the whole reason we didn't say that was because only once a year. It only does it once a year, not twice a year. Well, now that the one in the verse is referring to the inner goat, so then you have no limitations on the outer goat. And we're back to our question, let the goat of the 3 holidays atone for that which the outer goat of Yom Kippur atones for. So, when it says the word achas, it's written by the goat that's brought on the inner altar. Okay, question. So now says the no. La'olam achas mashmalei. Really, achas, we do learn the word achas. And really, achas should teach you both things. It should teach you Yom Kippur can't atone for the 3 holidays, which is not true. And it teaches you that the 3 regalim can't atone for Yom Kippur. So if you're learning the word achas, it should really go both ways. That it can't atone for anything else, and nothing else can atone for it. Yet we know that's not true. So what are you going to say? The shiny hacha, here it's different. What's different? Let's see. The Amar Kra v'chiper Aharon al karnosav achas b'shana. So the verse says that Aaron atones for the corners of the Mizbeach once a year from the blood of the chatas offering. Yeah. So now it says the Gemara that what? It says the Gemara that the Chiper Aaron al Karnosav Achas Bashana Karnosav de Mizbeach HaPnimihu de Kapar Achas Mechaper Ve'ena Mechaper Shtei Kaparos. So really, in the verse, it really says Achas twice, in the beginning of the verse and the end of the verse. So in the beginning of the verse, where it's referred to sprinkling the blood on the corners of the Mizbeach, that's specifically talking about the inner goat. So there, where it's talking about the inner goat, that atonement only happens once a year. That only happens for one atonement. That special sprinkling on the corners of the Mizbeach, which is referring to the inner goat, that's the goat brought on the inner altar, that is only mechaper achas, ve'ena mechaper shtei kaparos. However, had the chitzon, but it's coming to teach you that the outer altar, afilu shtei kaparos, that could atone for even two things. So that's why, on the one hand, the word achas tells you that that the three holidays cannot atone for the Yom Kippur offering, because it says achas, I think, at the end of the verse, which tells you that the outer offering will only be atoned for once a year. However, the beginning of the verse, which is referring to the inner, which is referring to the he-goat brought on the inner altar, tells you that it can only atone for one thing. It can only atone for one thing, but the goat brought on the outer altar could atone for two things, and therefore that goat could atone for the averas that the goat for the three holidays atones for. Hopefully they have a chart. Yeah. Okay. Now we're gonna get to a new concept now. It's interesting. What?
It was better than the previous.
I don't know. You can't be as good as that. You can't beat that, right? So okay. So Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Timidim. Okay, so they had every year, they had a number of sheep, 6 sheep. And by the time Rosh Chodesh Nisan came around, they had them there to bring for the Korban Tamid. They would bring them every day, 2 sheep, right? One in the morning, one in the evening. So came Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so now they would take 2 out of those 6. It sounds like they had backup sheep. So they would take 2 out of this, so you have 4 left over. The rule is you can't use communal offering sheep that were brought from last year's money. You can't use them for this year's offerings. So once Rosh Chodesh Nisan came, that's the cutoff date. So now you have leftover sheep. The question is, what do you do with those leftover sheep? So you'll say, what's the problem? Redeem them. Redeem them. The problem is that things that have, there's 2 kinds of sanctity. Kedushas Haguf, the thing itself is holy. And then the Kedushas Damim is much lower level. It's monetary. So, I want to give the animal to the Beis HaMikdash, or I want to give its value to the Beis HaMikdash. So it's going to have radical differences between those 2. So these sheep that are holy, that were set aside to be brought as the communal offerings, the only way you can redeem them is if they develop a blemish. If they develop a blemish, you can redeem them. But until told otherwise, until they develop a blemish, you can't just redeem them. So the Gemara is now going to say they're going to be redeemed, and then we're going to ask, where did their holiness go? It doesn't just fly away. It's got to go somewhere, because it doesn't have. And on that, we're going to try to bring proofs from other areas that, what do you mean? Holiness does fly away, doesn't fly away, yeah, fly away, not fly away. Yeah, so that's like sort of the discussion. Okay. So was that as exciting as previous? Or?
Sounds like you can skip over a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Suggestion denied. So no skipping. So Amar Ula. There's like the technical parts of the contract.
Yeah.
And then there's like the bold print. So the sources and the verses are more like the technical part. And there's like the bold print. So not that I would know, I never signed a contract, but yeah. So Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Ula in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So Timidin, the Korban Tamid, these sheep that are brought as the daily offerings. So Shelo Hotzerchu L'Tzibor, they're not needed anymore as they're leftover communal offerings. Niftin Timimim, they can be redeemed even when they're whole and not blemished. Okay, novelty. Yosef Rabba was sitting, the Ka'amar Leila Hashmaita, and he was telling this over, that Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he was telling it over to his colleagues. So Amar Le, Rav Chisda told Rabba, Rav Chisda about him, so Man Sayisla, like who's going to listen to you and to Rabbi Yochanan Rabcha, your Rebbe, to like such a law? There's a big problem over here. V'chi kedusha shebehen lahechan halcha. Where did their sanctity go? So you're going to take it and you're going to redeem it, but where did your sanctity go? Now, yeah, I skipped one step. Where how did they redeem it? So they redeemed it in an interesting way. So they took the animals, the sheep, and then they took coins that were not holy, and they redeemed them on the coins. And then they took those coins and they used it with where the other coins that weren't used anymore went. They used it to pay for the repaving of the walls of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, other areas. So now that the animals weren't holy anymore because their sanctity went onto the coins, so now they would go and buy those animals back from this year's money, right? So they want to save the animals. Like, why get new animals? Who knows what's going to happen? So you have animals from last year, which you can't use anymore. So you took them, put them onto coins, and the holiness, that's what we're asking, where did it go? But it went somewhere, fine. Now the animals are mundane, they're not holy anymore. So what do you do now? You take the New Year's money and you buy them. And now you can use them. So therefore, you sort of save, you recycle it, so to speak. Yeah. What do you say?
Kind of like refried.
Like refried, exactly. So yeah. So to that, we're asking to hold on. Where did their holiness go? Did it just disappear? So Amar Le, right? So like a good Jewish answer, right? So we're not going to answer you, but I'll just bring to you another place where you have to answer me. I mean, you're making an assumption that holiness can't just disappear unless it has a blemish. But I'll bring you something from the Ketores, the frankincense that was brought every day. We're going to see the same thing. So whatever your answer is to that question, you'll answer this question too. That's going to be okay. So Amar Le, he told them back, Atlo Tisbra, you don't agree to this idea. You don't have such a concept that you could sometimes, even if it doesn't have a blemish, the kedusha could go on to the coins, and it could sort of it could leave even without having a blemish. You don't hold to that concept. I'll prove to you that you have to hold to that concept. V'hatanan, so Moser Haktoras. So they made 368 manes, certain measurements of Ktores, corresponding to the solar year, plus 3. 3 were set aside for the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Now, 2 things. He didn't use all 3 on Yom Kippur. There were some leftovers. We had some backup. Yeah. And we fall. So we ended up having extra. Now, right. And he inevitably you have extra. Once again, what do you do with the extra Torahs? So Maha Osin. So now what you would do is with the extra Torahs is you would so you would take the extra Torahs and you would set it aside. You would set it aside to pay the workers in the Beis Hamikdash, and you would now take it and you would redeem it onto the wages that you wanted to pay the workers with. So you would take money to go pay the workers. You would take the Ktores and you would go redeem the Ktores onto this money. Yeah. So first you do is you take money from your pot of money, from the Trumas Halishcha, it's called, to pay the workers, and you would take now the Ktores, and you would, so to speak, you would put the sanctity, you would redeem it onto those coins, and now once you've used it for a mundane purpose, so now the holiness goes somewhere, it's not here anymore, So now it's not here anymore. And then, you would take money for the truma, which you would set that money aside to pay the workers. Now it's no longer holy anymore. Then you would take the ketores, the frankincense, and redeem it onto those coins. Then you redeem onto those coins. That would now make the ketores. It would now make the frankincense. It would make it also mundane once it's been redeemed onto those coins, and then you would now give it. You would now give it to the workers. You would give the ketores to the workers, which is no longer as payment, which is no longer holy anymore. And then you would buy it back from them, from the New Year's coins. So it's another way to recycle the ketores. Instead of getting rid of it and making new ones, so you would take money, which is holy, and put it aside for payment of the workers. That makes the money no longer holy. Then you would take the ketores, which is holy, and you would redeem it onto those coins. So now the ketores is no longer holy. You would then give the ketores. You'd give the ketores to the workers, and then you would buy it back. So you'd buy back the ketores. So now the workers got their money, they got paid, and you got the same ketores that was made last week that's now invalid. You would recycle it. So, yeah, exactly. It's a smart business, yeah. Based on Mikdash Economics 101. And now, right, you would take from the new truma, the New Year's truma, the money, the New Year's fund, and you'd buy back the ketores and designate it to use for this year. Okay, so now hold on. The ketores was holy, and we're asking about Amai Nema Kedusha Shebehen Laheichen Holcha. So you're gonna have the same question by the ketores. So where did its sanctity go? Now, a little bit nitty gritty over here is that the ketores is made in this kind of grinder. It's made in a grinder, and you grind it up. And the assumption now, which is going to be broken in a second, but the assumption is, right, so usually things get sanctity when they're put onto the Mizbeach, or things that are put onto the Mizbeach, they'll have this high level of sanctity. How did the ketores get its sanctity? So once it's put in this vessel, it's gonna get this sanctity. Now, usually the vessels that give something this high level of sanctity, called kedushas haguf, is called a kli sharis, the special holy vessels that are used in the base of Mikdash. So the assumption now is that when it's put into that grinder, it also got that status of kedushas haguf, the high level of sanctity. Now, if that's true, so now when you redeemed it onto those coins, so where did its sanctity go? So you're asking me what happened to my sanctity of my sheep over here. Where did it go? It didn't have a blemish. So you have to answer to me, though, where did the sanctity of the ketores go? And once I showed you that such a concept exists over there, I could say it also exists over here. So, but now we're going to ask on that assumption. I'm going to like, hold on. Ketores, commerce, you can't bring me a question from the ketores, from the frankincense. Why? Shiny ketores. It's very different. The kedushas damimhu. You made an assumption that when it was put into that vessel, it got the status of kedushas haguf. But that's not true. It's a much lower level of sanctity, a sanctity called kedushas damim, like the same way you take an animal and donate its value to the temple, not it itself to the temple. That's only called a monetary sanctity. That's not called an innate sanctity. That's a much lower level. Those things you can redeem even without a blemish. It's only the kedushas haguf, things that they have innate holiness, that you're not able to redeem unless it has a blemish. Now, on this idea that it has now kedushas damim, on that the Gemara says it's going to run into a few technical problems. Elamayata, now this is true. Lo ti pasel betul yom. So a tul yom is someone who went to the mikvah, and now he's waiting for sunset. So now, for many things, he's totally fine. He's not going to now contaminate, right, things with his impurity because he's really pure. However, for kachim, sacrificial things, and for truma, he can invalidate them. Not that he could transfer his sanctity over to them, and they can transfer it, but he could still invalidate it. So now, but that's only if it's only kedushas damim, a lower level of sanctity, he should not be able to invalidate it. It only invalidates things if he touches it that are a high level of sanctity. So now, if you're telling me now that Torah is a lower level of sanctity, how come I found that it can be invalidated when a Tvul Yom touches it? That would prove to you that it's a higher level of sanctity. So Elamayata Loti Pasal B'Tvul Yom. So then Allah Matanya, why did we learn? Nasna b'machtesh is once you put it into the grinder. So now nifsel is B'Tvul Yom. Now if a Tvul Yom touches it, validated. Sounds like putting it into the grinder gains it a high level of sanctity called Kedushas Haguf, and therefore I found you this concept that the Kedusha can sort of go away somewhere, to which I have a precedent to say the same halacha when it comes to our shepsala, our sheep. Okay, now maybe you'll break that assumption and you'll say, hold on, maybe all Kedushas Haguf, all Kedushas Damim, all lower level sanctity things are also invalidated by a Tvul Yom. You made an assumption that a Tvul Yom only invalidates things that are a high level of sanctity. Maybe we'll tell you it even invalidates things with a lower level of sanctity, to which I'll show you that the Ketores is still a lower level of sanctity. So let's break that assumption. Is that really true? We learned in Me'ilah, in Mesechus Me'ilah, so Haminachos, certain the menachos, the mincha offerings, yeah. It's a mincha in English, I don't know. So the mincha offerings, yeah, those are subject to me'ilah. Me'ilah, you can't use things that are holy for your own private purposes. So misha huktashu, from once they become holy, so then once they become holy, you could. There is me'ilah by them. Once you've sanctified them, there is me'ilah. Then it says, "Kitchu b'kli hochshuru lipasal b'tvul yom." Once you've placed it already into a special vessel used in the Beis Hamikdash, so now hochshuru, now its kedusha has completed, and it's now fitting. It's fitting to now become invalidated if a Tvul Yom touches it. So once it goes into a Kli Shares, then, and only then, it sounds like, can it be subject to being invalidated by a Tvul Yom. Uba Mechusar Kippurim, Ubalina. Two other halachas is a Mechusar Kippurim is one of four people that have to, they went through the whole purification process. A Zava, and a Mitzora, and I think a Yoletis. Those four people, they go through the purification process. They went to look at everything is done. They're just waiting to bring their sacrifice. So they're mechusar, they're lacking their atonement. They also, if they're going to touch these things, are going to invalidate it. Ubelina, and if you leave these flour offerings overnight, anything which is put into a kli sharis, which is now left overnight when you're not supposed to, it will be subject to the invalidation of being left overnight. However, what we need, though, it sounds like from the Mishnah, it's only kitchu b'kli in lo kitchu b'kli lo. It's only something which goes into a kli shares. Now, which gives it a high level of sanctity. Now and only now can somebody who is a Tvul Yom, who is waiting for sunset, only then can he invalidate this offering by touching it, or this thing which went into the kli shares. But if it never went into a kli sharis, let's say like ketores, so then it could not have. Therefore, it could not invalidate it. So kitchu b'kli in, lo kitchu b'kli lo. So okay, so we're stuck now. On the one hand, ketores doesn't sound like it has a level of kedushas haguf. It's kedushas damim. On the other hand, it gets invalidated by a Tvul Yom. It sounds like it does have the status of Kedushas Haguf. So it says the Gemara, Elamai Kedushas Hagufi. So what do you want to tell me? That Ketores really, when it gets put in the grinder, really it does attain this high level of sanctity called Kedushas Haguf. Well, if that's true, Elamiyata Tipasal Belina, it should be subject to the rule that you cannot leave it overnight, or else you will invalidate it. And so if that's true, Allah Matanan, a whole list of things. Hakometz, the flour that he gets part of, halavona, V'haktores, v'minchas kohanim, different offerings, v'minchas kohen meshuach, v'minchas nesachim. All of these different offerings, the Mishnah says, armo olin bahem. There's going to be me'ilah. There's going to be, if you misuse it, you're going to be liable. Mishahuktashu, once they finish their sanctity, so then they're going to be liable in me'ilah. Now, kitchu bekli, things that are sanctified in a special kli shares. So now, hochshuruli pasel, now they're able to be invalidated if you're a tful yom, if you're someone who's waiting for sunset, mechot or kippurim, someone who's waiting to bring their korban, ubelina, and someone who's waiting for someone who leaves these offerings overnight when they weren't supposed to, it'll all become invalid. Sounds like though into a kli shares. Only then, kitchu bekli and lo kitchu bekli lo. So therefore, since Torah is not put in a kli shares, so therefore, since it's not put in a kli shares, it's not going to be subject to the invalidation called lina of leaving it overnight, which would then indicate to us that it does not attain this high status of kedushas haguf. It only has kedushas hadamim.
You don't put it in the clay. What do you do it?
So the Torah is put into this grinder, and the seems to be the underlying back and forth here is, does that give it its sanctity? It sounds like the grinder is not considered one of the kli shareses. That was the thought. This part I'm fuzzy on a little bit. Could be. What? Yeah, Rashi points out in the very beginning, the thought is that this grinder is a kli shares, and it sounds like no, yes, no, yes, no, yes. Now, why is it different than everything else in the base of Mikdash? Good question. Yeah, right. Good question. Good question. Yeah. Oh, good. We got it. Oh, good.
You got it right.
Right. And therefore, what? So I think what
the grind is not a kli shares because it's not. Because wasn't only the one family that made it, correct?
Right. So, so it could be. I have to look at this better, but it could be a kli shares is only something which is that you put it into and then you bring it up to the mizbeach. But the funny thing is the Torah also brought in the mizbeach. That's the hard part. So it sort of breaks the rules. Really, it is brought into the mizbeach, so to really attain that status of kedushas haguf. Maybe the preparatory instruments they don't have the status of kli shares, right? Like I don't know. All the tongs that are used, let's say to take out the wicks from the menorah, is that a status of a kli shares? Because it's, I don't know.
Okay, what about the challah?
What, the knife?
Mm-hmm.
I have to look it up. What gets on the kli shares? For sure, something which is.
I think it's something that's on the mizbeach.
Right. So that's the funny thing here is, for me, there's two funny things here. First of all, the Gemara assumes anytime the Gemara tells you that the ketores is a lower level of sanctity, it assumes that going to the grinder is not a kli shares, because if the grinder was a kli shares, it would attain a high level of sanctity, and that's the back and forth over here. So yeah, to look up what the good, what qualifies as a kli shares. But now we're saying that if you would have a high level of sanctity, it would be subject to being left over overnight. But that's only something which is put into a kli, which is a kli shares. These things here, right? This question is why we assume that they're not a kli shares, and therefore the ketores is not subject to that to that rule of lino. So to that the Gemara says no, you can't mention lino. So lina ka'amrit, you want to know? You're asking me a question from lina being left overnight. Shiny Torah is different. Interesting. Hoil b'tzurasa b'chol hashana kula. That lina apparently changes the form, and leaving Torah overnight is not going to change its form. So it doesn't change by leaving overnight. It doesn't change from the way it was. It remains. This lina means to stay overnight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So you can't leave things overnight. Only things that were in a kli shares you can't leave overnight. So it sounds like the ketores is a lower level of sanctity because it's not subject to this restriction. To that we say no. Really, maybe it's a high level of sanctity. It's kedushas haguf, And the fact that it's not subject to being overnight, because if you leave the Ketoras, these incense overnight, it's not going to change its form. Its form going to invalidate it. I'm just wondering now. There's two steps to the Ketoras, maybe when you grind it and then when you actually put it into a vessel to bring it up. Maybe when you put it into that vessel, for sure it's going to get that status of Kedushas HaGuf. But the preparatory vessel of the grinding, not. Maybe only the vessels that are used. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. I'm guessing. I don't know if that's true.
Translation means during the entire year. In other words, it's not spoiled, it turns stale, there's no set time which it must be used. Hence the disqualification does not apply even if it contains physical sanctity.
Right. Okay, so what's coming out now? That these sheep that are left over and the Ketoras that are left over are both a status of physical sanctity. They're both Kedushas HaGuf. And in both cases, we still have this question. So where did their Kedusha go? You're doing this whole economic thing, which is great, but the problem is, where did it go? It didn't lose its physical sanctity. It didn't get a blemish. So where did it go? So v'chi Kedusha shebehen leheichan halcha. So sorry, mikol makom kasha. Okay, fine. So it has physical sanctity of the Ketoras, but still, where did its sanctity go? V'chi Kedusha shebehen leheichan halcha. Amar Rava, leiv bezdin masna alehem. Im hutzerchu, it's hutzerchu. V'im lav yu le dimehen. So the way Rashi explains is that you make a stipulation at the time where you buy these sheep and you sanctify them, the time that you have the Ketoras made and you sanctify it. So you make a stipulation that so these will retain a high level of sanctity in the event that they are used for this year's services. That you buy the sheep at the beginning of the year with the money, say it will attain its high level of sanctity in the event that it's used before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. In the event that it's not used before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so it should not have any sanctity. In the event that this Ketoras will be used this year, it should have a high level of sanctity. In the event that it's not used, it's not going to have a high level of sanctity. You make a stipulation. Why can't you stipulate, Jules?
Sounds like a pottery fluffy cup that turns color when it gets hotter, changes color when it gets.
I guess you have to label the. Oh, maybe do it for all the sheep. Maybe say on all the sheep. All the sheep here are going to have a high level of sanctity in the event that they're needed, and the ones that are not needed are going to be. I get to them brayro a little bit, right? Your favorite word, yeah. So tells his wife brayrish is what she's talking about. So Daf Yomi again. So I did hear something very interesting though. I was listening to a share about this, and I heard something interesting that we use this concept in things that are much more relevant to us. I didn't look it up yet, practically yet, but for example, the example that I heard was brought down was a bima. A bima is specifically designated for the kedusha, the holiness of the Sefer Torah. So how do you use the bima for other things?
Oh, books.
Let's say books. Let's say you want to lean on it. I don't know. How do you use it? So some say you use this concept. You make a stipulation. It's going to be holy for when you use the Sefer Torah, but or you make when you first buy the bima, you stipulate that you stipulate that it's going to be used for other things, and therefore it can go, even though it's designated for the Sefer Torah, but because you make a stipulation, it'll be used for other things also. So therefore it'll go down to a lower level of sanctity. Which I heard that a few rabbis in Bnei Brak, whenever they would read the Torah, they would put a special cover on that was specifically only used for the Sefer Torah. Then they would take it off based off these kinds of. Another example, which is interesting, was we know that after Hoshana Rabbah on Sukkot, the end of Sukkot, some people throw their Hoshanas on top of the Aron Kodesh. So some asked, what do you mean? The Aron Kodesh is specifically made for one purpose. It's not made to hold someone's Hoshanas on that. So how do you? So anyway, so it's interesting. These stipulations come up sometimes in interesting ways. That's right. So Okay, so look at the clock. I'm looking at Jules, trying to see if he's going to forgive me on Yom Kippur or not. So, I mean, the hold on. The Hamu, the Amr Higdish Zachar Ladamav, Kadosh Kedushas Agov. You have this concept that an animal that you sanctify as an animal which could attain a high level of sanctity, even if you didn't sanctify it as such, it will still take on that sanctity. It's you created a monster. No, so when you sanctify something which could be used on the mizbeach for a high level of sanctity, it will go and grab on as much sanctity as possible. So the problem is over here. How did you do this? These animals that could be used for a high level of sanctity, they should just take on that sanctity, and they should not be able to be stipulated to be a lower level of sanctity. So to that, the Gemara says, no, lo kasha. Had amar lidimei ola and had amar lidimei nesachim. So the ola offering, which is totally consumed on the mizbeach, if you go and you say, I want to give the monetary value of this ola, that's not going to work, because since it could attain the level of a high level of sanctity, so then you will, since it could be brought up to the mizbeach, therefore it's going to attain a high level of sanctity, and you can't lower that. However, if you say that this animal is going to be the value of this animal is going to be brought as as libations, so the animal is not brought as libations, right? So then it could have a lower level of sanctity because it's not brought as libations. So therefore, all you mean to say is you want to bring it you want to bring its monetary value. So so to here, you say about these animals or about the ketores that you say about these ketores the same thing, that you're just bringing their monetary value. What's exact the phraseology? Yeah, so meaning just like you can do it over there by saying we're going to bring this animal as libations, which doesn't mean it just means that you're going to bring its monetary value. So to here you could stipulate that the leftover money will be used to to repaint the base of Mikdash. Meaning you find a concept that even though something will attain a high level of sanctity, that doesn't mean automatically it's going to happen that way. It depends on your phraseology. So just like over there, it depends how you phrase it. So to over here, you are able to stipulate it. Okay. Oh no, I went over time. Jules?